Hello, everybody. Happy Saturday. Welcome. I've got Andre with me from Astrology Alert. So, hi, Andre.
Hi, everyone. Hi.
Hello. So, welcome, everybody. And we're just going to jump right in because I know you guys have questions of your own. And I've got my questions since I've got a lot of questions for Andre because I'm dying to hear what he has to say about some of these crazy people in our politics right now. So I wanted to kind of start, though, Andre, with anything that you see happening with the planets in astrology that might affect our politics now. As you know, as far as things like, oops, sorry about that. As far as things like, well, we had talked about kind of the rise of fascism and, people rising up and other things that might be, tipping the scales a little bit right now, if there's anything like that going on.
Well, I would say that in the planet shifting recently, and people were expecting this, people knew that Saturn was switching from Aquarius, where it's been since 2020, sort of, but really mostly 21 and 22. And then in the spring of 23, meaning now, and in March, early March, it switched into Pisces. And if you're looking at someone's individual chart, you usually would look for planets in the early part of the sign, or any of the signs that get affected, but it may not be noticeable right away. And yet in the political world, when that happened, to me, the key thing that took place was that it almost, perfectly coincided with Trump's fortunes really going down, because it became really obvious that he was about to be indicted, and that he was indicted late in the month. And so even though if you hear the buzz in the background, of the news, Fox News, well, not Fox News exactly, their situations are more complicated, but the news seems to be saying that Trump's fortunes politically are up because of the indictment. In reality, his fortunes are not up at all. He's facing more indictments.
Right.
And the fact that this began with Saturn entering Pisces, which is a very unfavorable sign for him, would tell you that. But interestingly, Saturn in Pisces is also not favorable for DeSantis, and that's why his energy has also suffered, because he's flailing around, passing bills, and late at night, because he knows they're very unpopular, but he needs to do it to please his base, and so on. So you've got two very compromised people at the moment at the top of the GOP, apparatus kind of thing. And that, I think, has a lot to do with where Saturn switch signs, where it'll be for the next 3 years, literally right through the election. So that's not going to change at all. Actually, for Trump, it'll get worse. And same for DeSantis, too. It's not particularly good. And then the other one I can think of, too, is the Pluto brief entry into Aquarius, where that's suspicious around that it seemed to be right on cue with what the revelations around Clarence Thomas. And turns out that the very early part of Aquarius, though that's not over either, because that'll extend well right into 2026, because Pluto moves so slowly and it'll go in and out and so forth. But that's a very unfavorable place for him. And you notice what's been happening in his case, that he's been getting a lot of bad press. And ironically or not, GINNI Thomas's chart is also suffering, and that's why she's in the middle of it, although we don't know what exactly is going on in their household or anything, but you can probably expect there's not a lot of happiness there. So
that, and that was going to be my first couple, was Clarence and GINNI Thomas. But I was going to ask you, is there something happening with, because it seems like in the case of, well, Trump is always this way, but in the case of DeSantis and Clarence Thomas, just the really bad decision making, just making really bad decisions. It's almost like their compass, their gut instinct, or that compass that a lot of politicians have, it's off. Is there something in the going on with their charts or with the planets in general that is just not great for clear decision making when it comes to these people?
I think that affects DeSantis more in his chart. I think with Clarence Thomas, it has more to do with the way things have lined up, because he didn't do anything all that different. It's just that things suddenly surfaced from before.
Right.
In the case of DeSantis, there's more of that for sure, but he's also very constrained because of Trump. He can't actually say, look, Trump is a fool, he's going to be indicted. He could be saying what Chris Christie's saying, which is the truth. Chris Christie,
Right.
another one of these potential people, he's saying, if we elect the nomination, if we elect Trump, we're going to lose. That's true. It's exactly what's going to happen. So, but DeSantis doesn't want to say that, because that would mean Trump might even get a bigger advantage. And so his decisions, they're bad, but what is he going to do? It's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. Although it is true, though, that when under Saturn problems like DeSantis is, the chances of making bad decisions do increase, because a person isn't as relaxed, and so you can make the wrong choice. So in a sense, both of those are true. Yes.
Right. And you see the thing with the whole thing with Disney, where he can't back away. He has that stubborn streak that they all have, where even though it's going awful and it's not good for him, he just cannot back away from it,
This
that
is the
stubborn
thing
streak.
I'm really curious about your, if I recall, your take on this is that you don't see either of them getting the nomination, right?
I haven't. It's just interesting. I was just talking about that today earlier, because I've never seen that. And I don't know the series of events that makes that happen, but I thought, what it looks like it could be that DeSantis, things go so badly for him, he just decides maybe 2028, maybe I won't do it this time and just stay in the governorship. And then something happens with Trump where he can't run. And so it's got to be somebody else that's there. It can't be either one of them. So that's one scenario, but I've always seen it being somebody like more of a Pence energy, kind of a not as bombastic or a Pompeo, that kind of energy, just kind of a Christian, boring, I hate to put it that way, but kind of like that, rather than bombastic and crazy and that kind of thing. I'm not saying it couldn't, anything is possible, but I've just never seen it, and I'm still not. And even though in front of my face, it looks like, oh yeah, it's got to be one of those guys, but I've not gotten that from my guides. So I just have to take their word for it so far.
Yeah, this is the thing, that at least on appearances, it feels like the Republican base is really controlling the Republican Party. Yeah. And so they don't seem to be in any mood to elect anyone unless they are bombastic. And this is why I think DeSantis is constantly trying to imitate Trump, Mr. Tough Guy. Yeah. If Disney says, I'm going to do this, well, then I'll counter you with some other thing. And I never accept the other person's, even if it's a microaggression, it has to be responded with a punch in the face. So that would be great. At the moment, the base seems really stuck, but I suppose it's possible. It would be good for the country, I think, in some ways, to not have.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm not sure of the scenario, but that I keep getting that it's not going to be either one of those guys, and it just could be their, like you said, their luck is just it completely runs out, and it's just not happening for them. Yeah. Now, what about Clarence Thomas and Ginny Thomas? What have you gotten for them?
Well, what I get for them now, Ginny Thomas, I don't have a birth time. Clarence Thomas, there is a birth time.
Oh,
Clarence
okay.
Thomas, what I said in a video I did a while back is that his risk is much more from his health than from what he's done. Because, and by the way, that's not really a stretch just in logical, conventional terms, because the Supreme Court is so shielded from anything. Right. I can't believe they have rules that say, well, you can police yourselves. That'd be like telling two NFL teams, it's okay, no referee, just figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I feel there would be blood everywhere. So
Right.
it's incredible that they allow this. And so I would say the odds increase, but over time, I mean, I'd be amazed if it happened after the next election, you could maybe
Right.
get some changes to the Supreme Court where you at least get some ethics rules or something. But I don't know that there's enough there to, have him leave the court like some people think. But his chart is entering this period, which goes right through the election and beyond. That is very unfavorable for his health. And he already had some health events related to that very planet a while back. And that's what makes me really suspicious.
Oh,
And this angle is even
interesting.
worse. And it's also absent any actual health event. That particular angle is not helpful for making good choices or even for things going well. That's the other issue. This is what I've been saying a lot about Putin, why the
Mhm.
angles he's on are either really maladjusted, bad decision making, off course, and or health, right? And health tends to be the downfall of a lot of people. And also there's the other thing too, that this is one of my, I don't know, theories, I think, but I think it's probably true that when a person is not feeling well, they will almost always make bad decisions as well,
Oh,
because it's
right.
just common sense to realize your energy's low, you're overcompensating, and so you're not
Nothing.
going to
Yeah.
see as clearly, and then therefore potentially make a bad move. And so it's
Right.
very possible that Thomas is already there, as we speak, that he's already not feeling all that great.
Yeah, and Ginny, I've gotten health things for him, and I've gotten that he ultimately leaves for her because of her or because of her health or something. Do you get anything with her health or with her, I don't know, having a psychotic break or something because she's
Well,
so odd?
I mean, the only thing with her without a birth time is that she is right in the middle of a Saturn period from the spring, March, right through into next February, March, about a year.
Oh,
And
wow.
what I notice is when a person is not disciplined, then she definitely is not a disciplined person.
No, not
She's
at
in
all.
fact, she's a bit of a wackadoodle,
Yeah,
the way
yeah,
she
she's
used to
got
be part of a
something wrong
cult.
there. Yeah.
So that's generally not going to be, generally and factually, not going to be a good period. And that can affect her health. It can affect everything. And it's certainly not a happy period that she's in. But it's hard to be, I don't get the same ability to look at it with precision the
Right.
way I do with Clarence Thomas.
Yeah, because I that's what I've always gotten as to why he leaves. Because I do see him leaving. I think a lot of readers have seen him leaving soon, and then maybe the next year or so. And um, I,
Because of her.
I've always gotten it's because of her for some reason. But um, so far, I'm not really getting anything on her health or anything like that. So I'm just kind of just thinking, okay, well, it's because of her, but I guess we'll find out. But I just thought maybe it's her mental health because she's definitely something is definitely going on with her for sure.
Well, I mean, when it comes to this crew, I'll take anything.
Yeah.
How about that? Yeah, whatever the
Whatever.
reason is. Yeah, because I mean, quite frankly, there's just some of these people. I mean, I'm sorry, it just is beyond the pale. It's like what we're watching with Fox News. I mean, you kind of wonder, seriously? I mean, are we just going to lie through our teeth, and then it's just all business, and it's
I
crazy.
know.
And
It's
Clarence
crazy.
Thomas, Clarence Thomas and Alito were the two dissenters on this mifepristone drug. I mean, seriously, I mean, what are we
It's
talking about here? They want to go back to the 12th century. I'm not kidding. This is just it's
it's
crazy.
insane. It's insane. Yeah, it's insanity on the court, and they have such a low approval rating. It's like it cannot go on like this. It just can't.
Yeah.
So Tony Stokes has kind of I think some general questions about things going on in astrology right now. So she's saying, will Andrew be speaking to? Can he speak about the new moon in Aries, the first sign meaning new beginning, as well as the hybrid solar eclipse and Mercury in retrograde as it relates to politics and court cases?
Well, new moon in Aries, it just happened
Okay.
a couple of days ago, 3 days ago, and it'll affect different people differently, because my experience of new moons is that wherever those degrees are, whatever specifically they're doing to your chart makes a big difference. So I've had new moons where I felt great, really connected and really at ease, and some where I didn't, and that was one of them.
Right.
I didn't like that one at all. And that's where in astrology you see the degrees and you think, oh, that could be challenging. So,
Right.
but then broadly speaking, Aries, or for that matter, any new moon in a cardinal sign. So the new moons in Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, they're always great for starting things because cardinal is the starting beginning mode.
Right.
And so, and also spring is the primo moment to start things as well. It's the
Right.
most auspicious period. So in that sense, you could say for anyone. And generally what will happen is people will get the impulse because something in their chart gets triggered around that new moon. Otherwise, they would see regularly every single time in the spring, they're always starting things, and that doesn't happen. It'll vary year to year, right? And the other question was the eclipse. The eclipse, whenever you get eclipses, they intensify the energy of the moon, either to make it even more clear, because I've had those eclipses, and you get the opposite eclipse where it really darkens the energy and you feel really off. But generally, people make astrologers, it's kind of a sensationalist thing. Eclipse is going to be the end of the world. They're really passing things. They don't do that
Right.
much beyond the period that they're in. So,
And then she asked about Mercury in retrograde as it relates to politics and court cases.
well, Mercury retrograde. So one thing would be people are always watching around things starting in Mercury retrograde. It's most of the time, not 100%, but odds are better not to start a court case during Mercury retrograde. But
Okay.
it doesn't mean that it'll destroy it either. It just could mean that there would be delays, having more to go over things more, which is really what Mercury retrograde is best for, is things that have been put on the back burner, they get brought into the foreground. And so, for example, that could line up with what's happening in Georgia, where we keep hearing that Fani Willis is close to an indictment, and that might come in the next 3 weeks. And so it doesn't mean it destroys it. It means that it was put on the back burner and then brought forward. So I wouldn't, Mercury retrograde, it has such a terrible reputation, but it's not as bad as people think,
Right.
The main thing is that, for example, if you buy a house on Mercury retrograde, just check everything over more when you're signing and so forth, because you may have to go over it again, and redo it, or it'll take longer than expected.
Right. Yeah, I've got, since you managed Fani Willis, I've got her, I think, indicting in spring. And then I've got Jack, at least for me, this is how it came through, that he would be indicting in summer. So so we're going to, Trump's going to be, have his hands full.
Yeah, the thing is that spring, it's spring until the 21st of June. So in Mercury's retrograde now and into middle of May. So there's a swath there, middle of May for about 5-6 weeks. It's still spring. So it could happen in May. And I remember a number of legal experts, people really dig into the details and had some sources and so forth. They had mentioned May, quite a few of these people as being the point. So,
okay, well then, hopefully, whenever it happens, it will be delightful. So we'll just, we're all about it. So Janice had a question about Geminis, and she said, so many Geminis in government having troubles. She's a Gemini. She's not seeming to have trouble. So can you give some insight to the rest of the chart that holds better key outlooks than they have? So what may be happening in her chart that's making her okay and them not so okay?
Well, it's pretty. The answer to that is actually pretty clear. It's that she's not a crook and they are. I mean, quite frankly, let me think about it. Either you're a total crook like Trump, who's a Gemini. An almost total crook like Giuliani, and like what's happening to them is in prior periods when the Gemini was not being challenged that way, they were committing crimes, essentially breaking the law, and so then Saturn enters Pisces, which is at odds with Gemini. Saturn in Pisces challenges Virgo, the opposite sign, and challenges Sagittarius and Gemini, the square signs, and also challenges Pisces itself as well. So people that are Pisces could face problems if they've done things before, which a lot of these Geminis have. The one that so far seems to be eluding it, and I think it's because he's the cleverest of the group, is the ex-attorney general, who's also a Gemini, because I think he knew in late 2020 that Trump was going to potentially put him behind bars, and he wasn't interested in that. So he pulled away, and now you see him doing shows where he's actually not hoping for Trump to get charged, but he kind of seems to be giving, almost like giving directions around it.
Yeah,
So
well, yeah.
he
seems willing to cooperate. Let's put it that way.
Exactly. But a lot of other Geminis, including, Marjorie Taylor Scream, I mean, she's a Gemini kind of in the same degrees as early degrees like that, close to where Barr's planet is. But in her case, she already did something that nearly got, she almost was banned as a result. Probably other things will happen as well.
So, well, that's the next person. So what did you see for her do you have a chart for her?
Well, I only have a day, but I know that even without a time, that where the sun position is, she's getting a Saturn walloping starting next month and continuing pretty well into next year. So her situation is downtrending pretty badly, and she's helping it along by the things that she does. But to answer the question from the person that asked, if you're on a Saturn transit and you haven't done such things, then there's no problem. However, whatever you've done, whatever it is, Saturn can call you on it. Like, for example, if something develops around your health, it's typically connected to lifestyle, sometimes wear and tear, things like that. And ideally, and this is where Saturn is very, very useful, is if you get a Saturn cycle, it can actually be the most fruitful part of a cycle in that you work toward getting things done. You sacrifice your fun time and you focus, which is what Saturn is best at. So that's the irony of Saturn, that you nobody likes it, but you can't really make things happen unless Saturn is there to encourage you to work. So anyways, bottom line, no fear on that though, because I've seen those comments on my channel as well. Oh my God, the Geminis, they're horrible. And or they'll say, well, I'm a good person. Why are you saying these things?
Oh, right.
Yeah, exactly.
So and I like your approach with things like that, because it's kind of like, if you're doing these, if you're challenging the energy, the planet, or the energy of the planets, if you're challenging it in some way, it will pack a wallop. And if you're not, if you're just going along and doing your thing and being careful or whatever, it doesn't apply to you really. It applies to those that are messing around and doing dumb things.
Yes, exactly. Like Saturn is a consequence planet, and it is really hard not to have some consequences. No matter how good you are, you will likely leave something a little off somewhere. So then you deal with it. There are massive layers. Like Fox just got hit with that. Fox, if you look at the chart for the beginning of that station, the very first on air, I use that chart as the original Fox chart, and they're right in the thick of a Saturn period. Well, what is the consequence? The consequence is they did something really awful. So then they were called on it, and it cost them a lot of money. And by the way, that's not over either. That continues because Fox has that planet where it is. It doesn't stop being affected by Saturn until next year. So there are many, many months when further things could develop. And that's what I think will happen too. There'll be other things.
I think you're right about that, because I got a similar thing, that they're just not out of the woods, and it just seems like a steady decline. I even saw what's his face leaving, the big boss, what's his name? Murdoch leaving. Yeah. So it just doesn't seem like there's any I think they hit their peak. I think they've peaked. They're just going to kind of be on a unless they, change. And I think that, these people have such a hard time backing up and changing their positions on things. They'll just double down and double down and double down until they're finished,
It's true. It's true. I mean, part of the problem is that you're seeing during these years all these forces swirling around where the weakness of structures is revealed, such as, like, if you have a capitalist system, the incentive is to make money. But if the incentive is to make money, a news station has to pay attention to their audience. And with Fox, it's become this extreme thing where instead of telling the audience what's happening, they tell the audience what they want to hear.
Right, right.
That is not a good plan from the perspective of truth. But they say, well, if we don't tell them that, then they don't watch, and then we lose money.
The
But I mean, how
catch-22.
can you be in the news, in business? I mean, this is so crazy, because to say I build a product so that you will like it, that's one thing, but to do it this way is nuts. But I was hearing today, it's really interesting. There are all these cross currents, because to my mind, on women's issues, people like Alito and Thomas are living 2 centuries ago. I said 12th century, but okay, let's not exaggerate. Let's say 18th or 19th century, right? But they were saying that in this report, what were they saying? That Thomas, they didn't mention Alito, but they mentioned Thomas actually has spoken about how the way the defamation laws originating in that Sullivan case with New York Times and all that, he thinks they're too loose, and that this is encouraging news organizations to basically lie whole scale because they're not worried about being challenged. And so it's odd to hear that from him, because if he thinks that, then that means maybe someone else in the court thinks that, and you might get enough there to potentially tighten that down, because I think it should be tightened. I mean, you can allow First Amendment without being crazy, and what they did in 2020 is just unbelievably awful, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for sure. And I can't find the question, but somebody was asking about Jim Jordan. So have you ever done his chart before?
He's another one with no time of birth, but with a period while he's in charge, whatever that is for him, because he's doing all these crazy things. But
right,
it's a constant irritation, a constant going nowhere type of energy, which is the way the man is.
Interesting.
He doesn't accomplish anything. He was already, I don't know if people knew this, he was already known back in the Boehner era when the speaker before Paul Ryan. So back in the Obama years, Boehner couldn't stand him. What's his name again? The guy we're talking about. My mind is blanking. Anyway, he came in the Tea Party years, and the Freedom Caucus and so forth. And he's never passed a bill the whole time. Right? So he's basically, to me, he's like the way he talks he's like an auctioneer. All he does is talk, and make noise, and rabble rouse. And also, notice he makes terrible decisions all the time, because he'll say, okay, we're going to investigate so and so, and then they get these witnesses that talk about something else or make a horrible case, and then the news says things aren't working. So I wouldn't worry about him, other than the fact that he's going to be annoying to watch for the next.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great way to see him, because that is what he projects, is just agitation. He's just agitated with the world. He's agitated with everything. And it comes across as this, like you said, just kind of an irritant. He's just always upset about something and always complaining about something. Yeah. That's him. Yeah.
No, and they do this thing where, I mean, there's always politics, but they do this thing where they're always accusing the Democrats of playing politics, when politics is all they do. They do nothing other than optics. Like they have to do this thing now with with Alvin Bragg. Now I'm curious about that. What's your sense of that? Because when you think about what he's doing with Alvin Bragg, bringing in that prosecutor Pomerantz, who had left Bragg's office under bad terms because he wanted Bragg to prosecute before Bragg was ready, and all of that. But then when you think about it, you think, well, do you want to put that guy on your and question him, because he's not your friend? So what's stopping him from saying something that will make things worse for you? Because he thinks by bringing him there, it'll help him. But I'm skeptical.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because Pomerantz, it's interesting because if he ends up going, I feel like he'll say very little. I feel like it will be one of these things where he'll keep saying, this is an ongoing investigation. I can't, da, da, da. You know what I mean? It will be almost boring. There won't be any meat to it. There'll be nothing to it. And it will just look like kind of a waste of time is the way because I don't feel like anything explosive or so if they actually get him to be able to be on the stand or answer questions, it's going to be very uneventful is kind of what it feels like. So, and
well, they're lucky that it's not me, because if I'm in Pomerance's shoes and his objective was to nail Trump, so I would go to that session with the intention of figuring out a way to throw in there 2 or 3 bombs where I would say, something like, Trump is absolutely guilty of this. He's basically he's a white collar criminal.
Yeah. Well, your mouth to God's ear. I would love to see that. That would be amazing.
This is the thing that it's very risky to bring in witnesses that could be hostile.
Right.
And these guys frequently will do this, where they show how they're so out of attunement. They'll assume that because he was at odds with Bragg, that he's not going to betray Bragg. And that's not necessarily what's happening here at all, because his main enemy or his main problem was Trump, not Bragg. Bragg was just in the way of doing it. Yeah.
You're absolutely right about that. And I always think that they always tend, especially someone like Jim Jordan tends to think they're the smartest. They can get, they overestimate their own skills. And so I think it will be and end up being kind of either blowing up in their face or being kind of a nothing because he just won't talk,
Mm-hmm.
So something has come up just recently. We were talking about it this morning, and that is Michael Flynn and his health. And it was, I guess, Trump was making some kind of remarks about him having to stay healthy and be healthy so I can have you in the administration and blah, blah, blah this morning. And when I looked at it, I got a kind of a Cancer vibe around him, for entertainment purposes only, by the way. But I got kind of a Cancer thing, and also something about him losing lots of weight. And so I just wondered if you had ever looked at his chart before, and if there's anything about him and that you can remember in his chart that might have to do with his health.
Well, he's one that I can't really comment on, because there isn't even it was hard to get a proper day chart, never mind the time.
Really?
It's completely unknown. Yeah, he's a bit in the background, like another one is Jack Smith. He's now a foreground person, and there's one reference in a website to his birth time, which, if it's true, it's great, because it's really at odds with Trump, which would make sense. But how do you trust that? Usually you look for if someone is well known enough, it'll be even any Google search will show it immediately, or you'll see it in a Wikipedia entry and so forth. But Flynn was one that was very slippery back in the day, and it's possible that it's there now, though. I could look again, but in the last while I haven't sought it out.
Well, and he strikes me as kind of paranoid, so I wouldn't be surprised if he got rid of any information about himself that's out there.
Yeah, that's a good point.
He's one of those.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And Truth, thank you so much. Yeah, go ahead.
No, that was it. That was my main comment. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was just interesting, because I didn't expect it. Nothing had come up otherwise if I hadn't been asked about it. But it was just kind of interesting. So I thought, well, I did pick up something with him, and we'll have to see what it is. So, yeah. And then the other person's health that everybody's been asking about is Alexei Navalny. I did feel like I kept getting like a light bulb kind of like dimming and then brightening and then dimming. So I feel like there's something going on with him. But have you ever looked at Alexei Navalny's chart?
I have to confess, not in the last while. The only thing I can just say a couple of things I've heard in the news recently.
Yeah.
Around that things have gotten worse for him, because he's now in, how do they put it? He's in a prison where the person in charge is particularly bad, and lots of torture and awful stuff, and something about how his sentence could be even more. They could add years to his sentence. I mean, Putin is intent on disappearing him, so
Right.
he's going to need a little bit of a miracle to get out of the jam he's in. I don't know if you see it, but I hope you do, because it would
Yeah,
be great.
I have in the past, I've seen him getting out, and things like this, energies can change. But I have, and when I looked at him recently, that's what they gave me, was kind of a light bulb kind of brightening and then kind of dimming and brightening. So I feel like he's fighting whatever's going on. He's fighting it. But it may not be, they may get to him before, all of this wraps up. So yeah, let me look at, oh, hi, Debbie. Debbie's here. We have lots of people in the house. Hi, everybody. What are the chances, as far as Trump's chart is concerned, what are the chances of him fleeing?
Well, I mean, I would say you'd have to say anything is possible with Trump, because a chart doesn't specifically say. Sometimes it does. I mean, you can see, for example, the specificity in his chart around taxes, insurance, loans is pretty clear that's what, including what just happened to him in New York, for example. It's based on that. But the thing is, he could flee. It's possible, but if he does, it's not going to improve things for him. He's in a major downtrend, spanning years and years. So, flee or not flee, it's not going to help him. But I would have to say it's at least somewhat possible. Do you see that? Do you see him, going to Saudi Arabia?
It's so funny, because what I got when I looked at that, it was so funny, because I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. What my guide said were that he would go if he could go without looking like he was running, he would go. So if he could leave, if he could flee without looking like he's fleeing, he would go. So, something like, oh, I'm building this golf course in the middle of, wherever, Russia or Saudi Arabia, and I'm going to go there, and I just like it better there, so I'm going to live there now, that kind of thing. But it would have to look like he's not fleeing, not running away, because he doesn't want to look like he's running away. So
it'd be hard to pull off, though, because if you do that, if you leave for any reason, I mean, I don't know. How does that? Basically, he'll be out of our hair if he does.
Well, that's the other thing, right? It's like, okay, see you. Goodbye, and don't come back. Don't ever come back.
The thing with him is he's a really malevolent force, and the sooner he's removed from any kind of influence, the better. So, to be honest, I would take almost anything, even though lots of people say, well, yeah, but the mood of the Republicans is still that way. But the top person, the person that is wielding the influence, has a lot of influence, and he's particularly toxic, and he's like a purveyor of everything is upside down. It was fun. He calls his fake Twitter account, he calls it Truth Social, which is the opposite.
Everything's the opposite. Exactly.
I don't think he says one true thing and ever. They're all lies, top to bottom. So
exactly. And what about? Do you ever? What is going on with Mitch McConnell? Do you see anything? Have you seen anything with his health and his chart?
Yeah, well, Mitch McConnell, actually, that's a really great astrology example, because he is born right at the very beginning of Pisces, and it was just when Saturn went in that he fell and hurt himself, and that's a classic potential outcome to a Saturn cycle. Again, but I'm not saying that any person that has Saturn in that way would also fall out. I mean, part of it is perhaps from being older. Part of it is that with Saturn, one of the things about Saturn when it's around, and this is good for everyone to keep in mind if you're on a Saturn cycle, pay more attention, be more deliberate. You focus more, you almost overcompensate for potential danger that may or may not be there, in which case maybe you wouldn't fall down the stairs, let's say, right?
Right.
But he hurt himself, and then now he's recovering because the planet is moving forward from there, but he's not done with that cycle, because later this year, the whole fall, starting in September, all the way until the end of the year, Saturn encircles those really early degrees. So that's another problem period for him. And it may be another problem that surfaces like that, or it may be that his health downtrends, or a third possibility is things just are not going well at all in his life at that time, right? But it's challenging for sure. And he's in that cycle that, in a sense, extends through the whole year, because in between, the degrees aren't being triggered, but it's not particularly good to have the Saturn going through there for someone like him. Let's just say that.
And that kind of lines up with what I've got for him as well, which is that he may come back for a while and leave sometime next year. So that's kind of what I got.
Very possible. Yeah, it's very possible, because when you see Saturn cycles, they tend to be important beginnings where you're setting a trend for many years to go. But the older you are, the more likely the beginning is more like an ending, and that the beginning is the beginning of getting out of where you were, type thing, because you're just past your prime, past being able to do it properly. And so it could be that for sure. Yes.
Right. And what about Putin? What do you have for Putin?
Well, Putin, I'm holding back to see what happens in the May-June period, which is there's a Jupiter shift there, which doesn't help him. And so overall, when you look at his chart, he is a bit like Thomas, or a lot like Tom, maybe even worse than Thomas in some ways,
really?
Where health is really the factor. And these rumors keep surfacing about Putin dealing with something. I would not be surprised one bit that in part it's true, and in part it's maybe that it goes back enough. This goes back to that thing we were saying earlier about when health is challenged, and especially if you've had to do chemotherapy or something aggressive, because he looks different than he used to look. He looks like someone who's maybe on steroids or something. So then decision making gets compromised, and you could almost say your luck gets compromised. You make moves that don't turn out. So the way I see the more we go into the rest of this year, next year, it just gets worse. It's maladjusted. It could be from, as I said, really bad health or things just not going well, and they don't seem to be going well. So
right. And he's another one with that bad decision making, right? He's making all these awful decisions for the war, and then he also had a fall. He also had a fall down the stairs as well.
Is that for sure?
As far as I heard, because I heard that they said that he fell down and crapped his pants. And he said he fell down, but he didn't crap his pants, and that was like in the Russian newspaper. So I'm like, well, it probably is all true. And probably is that he did and he did, but he said he fell, but he didn't hurt himself, and he didn't, whatever.
Exactly. And when you think of, his whole that authoritarian, image-driven approach, and he'd be on the horse with no shirt on, to show up his masculinity, and now he's going down the stairs and that's obviously not a good look, and he would be mortified. But then you also have to ask, okay, so because he has Mars in Sagittarius, I'm remembering, and that's typically a fairly athletic Mars, because the Sagittarius part of the body is the middle of the body, hips, it's where you turn, and typically a person like that is more athletic than not, let's say. You don't have to be professional or anything. So then you think, well, falling down the stairs, that's usually not something that happens unless something is off with you. You'd have to be, you lose your balance. How does that even happen? So to me, it's a telltale sign that something isn't working there. Something is off.
I think that's spot on. And I wanted to ask you also about, somebody asked about, who was the other person that we're asking about? I lost my train of thought because we were talking about Putin. The head of Ukraine, the leader of Ukraine.
Zelensky. Yeah, Zelensky, he survived a period from the start of the war until this year, that was really risky. And the way for him personally, but the way it turned out was that aspect, because that aspect is literally a death aspect and a death angle in astrology. But the way it found them is that he was surrounded by death constantly, and I mean that couldn't have been much fun at all. But he is in a better period now than he
Oh,
was before.
good.
It's just that you cannot expect to snap your fingers and
Right.
the problem be solved. But uh, as time passes, it's the opposite of Putin. They're like lines that are going in opposite directions, and so
Mm,
he should
okay.
do okay. Subject to the fact that it's a very dicey, very difficult situation in Ukraine. I mean, for obvious
And,
reasons.
and so you kind of talked about when you did your video on Pluto, you kind of talked about these kind of fascistic leaders that have these kind of rises and then they have these falls. And somebody was asking about, you really see a lot of, you see some uprisings, like we saw stuff, going on in Israel, we saw Iran, we saw other places where, like in Brazil, where we have this stuff going on with the leaders back and forth, and then now we're going to have Erdogan in Turkey. So, as far as that energy, that kind of more fascistic, really, whatever this is, that energy to dominate, what is happening with that as far as the charts,
Well,
the stars?
yeah, to my mind, that one, the times that I've watched the Second World War videos and trying to study Hitler's chart and things like that, it's really informative because you see this thing where there was a rising wave in the 30s. Pluto was in Cancer, then the opposite sign to where it's been, because it's been in Capricorn since 2008, and it was in Cancer during the 30s. But the end, or the beginning of the end, pardon me, of that fascistic pattern, because remember it was Hitler, Mussolini, the Japan went nuts and tried to take over the world. There was Franco in Spain. There was this fascist, you could say, very right wing mentality operating. But once Pluto left Cancer and entered the next sign, it began to go the other way. Although it took a while because you can see this happens in 1940 and the war went on for another 5 years. So this is where it gets a little scary. But they lost it all and the world changed in a massive way. And now it's similar in that Pluto is just making its way out of Capricorn. It did a little bit this year, a little more next year, and fully out in 25. And I think this one is even more direct in pointing toward power to the people and not to single individuals, or at least power to groups, which could be a little dangerous too, because that does favor corporations, people creating groups that might not have the best interests of the entire group at heart, let's say, right? But overall, Pluto in Aquarius, where it's going to be until 2042, is a much better sign for democracy than Pluto in Capricorn. And you notice that Pluto in Capricorn 2008 didn't start right away, but by the time it was in the middle, that was when Trump came in, and that was Bolsonaro. There are a number of places in the world where it got really dicey. And I think we're in that place again, as we were in the 1930s, where democracies are in a bit of a struggle because Israel hasn't been this turbulent since forever. And now all of a sudden they're having trouble. And yet you do see, though, that in every case, I mean, Brazil switched sides. It went back to Lula. And, everywhere there's pushback. I mean, including in Netanyahu was trying to do that crazy thing with the Supreme Court, and the country fought back pretty hard and kept them at bay. So the only problem with this stuff is that it drives people nuts, because you would think, why can't they just solve it immediately? Well, you can't. It takes longer always than you want it to. And in fact, then when it happens, then people are still not happy because it feels like it just happened by default, and they don't remember how much they were wanting it to happen 2 years before. But to my mind, it's going that way. The other thing is that the Pluto and Aquarius period, if you go back to that period, that's in the post the American Revolution, like in the 90s, and that was the French Revolution and so forth. There were a lot of uprisings of people rebelling against the upper class, such as in France, it was the middle class was really upset with much like now, there was too much money at the top. And so
Right.
this is why I'm thinking you'll probably see places like Iran and maybe even China, where everything is top down, and things are concentrated at the top.
Yes.
It could change. That's how I would see it. So
And,
hopeful, but a little
is
nervous too, because of how intense it is.
and so do you see, when you have these planetary shifts, do you see, how does that affect the economy? What happens with do you see more, well, like you said, corporations are kind of having more control, and what about the billionaires and all that stuff? I mean, I'm like, it can't keep going like this. We cannot have trillionaires and then bazillionaires or whatever comes after that. It cannot keep going like this. It just can't. So where do you think the breaking point is, or do you see a breaking point somewhere coming up?
Well, my best guess on that one is that they will be checked. I don't know how much, but once you distribute more power to more people, the logical conclusion is you have to level the playing field more, because that's the problem. Right? You've got a lot of people, and there are many people in the middle not getting a big enough slice of the pie,
Right.
and too many people at the top getting a bigger piece. But this is the thing, though, the world in a way is always a very complicated place, and people are always looking maybe sort of for this nirvana utopia. I don't know, not in my lifetime.
Right.
I'm not optimistic about
That's
that
what
at
we
all.
want.
No, exactly. So, but it's still, still encouraging. And there are things about the way things are happening that to me are encouraging, such as, in contrast to what happened in the Second World War, now, even though there are more ways that you can lie, for example, and twist things and fake things, yes, but information moves really quickly, and more people are aware more quickly of what's going on. And if more people are aware, it's a lot more difficult to carry out these heists, and these maneuvers. The other thing too is that back then, the world was not as affluent as it is today, and you can almost sort of understand, say, why in Germany they went completely nuts. They were coming off a really bad period where they had lost the war and they had a lot of inflation, like really, not the inflation we have here, really horrible inflation. They were a very aggrieved and suffering people. So then it's more natural to bring in a nut job who says, "I'll save you," and then he tries to take over the world.
Right.
Whereas in the US, it's just not happening that way. So you have to manufacture it. You have to create this idea, like how Trump keeps saying, "Oh, it's all going to hell," and
Right.
country. I mean, where? What are you talking about?
Right.
What are you telling me? It's going to hell because of you. That's the thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
That two realities we're living in right now, we're not seeing it. We're not in the same reality as these people. And they do it. They not only do it for, the long term that they hope to, get into office or whatever, but they're doing it for the short term, just to earn money, just to scare people into give me $5, give me $10,
Yeah, you keep it going. I mean, this is the danger. You see there the danger of momentum. Momentum is great in anyone's life, because when you get momentum, then things happen a little more easily. But then you can get stuck in your momentum and continue doing something maybe you shouldn't do. And this can happen to countries, to any kind of thing that develops. It's like a ball rolling down a hill, or a snowball, and it gets bigger and bigger and more powerful. And so that's part of the problem. But
Absolutely.
even so,
networks.
yeah,
Like,
but I think overall, because the thing about the US that I think is probably the most special thing that people don't appreciate is there is a pretty strong rule of law. You see that even though people complain, "Oh, Merrick Garland, he's a coward." What are you talking about? Have you ever tried prosecuting someone properly? That's not an easy thing to do. But relentlessly, it keeps moving. You gather the facts, you present them. Look what just happened to Fox. That's a classic example where the facts do not support you. So now you have a problem, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the facts will come out, they can't, when it's discovery like that, things are going to come out, and it's bad all the way around. And and they settled in the end. It was the weirdest, again, bad choices, right?
Well, yeah, except that maybe they didn't have much of a choice based on what would have happened. But their next problem is that now they've got other suits coming, and they've opened the door to it. And some people say that they'll just do the same thing again in 24. I don't know about that. That might be a lot more risky now. They're going to be more careful with.
Yeah, for sure.
They attack in that way.
Well, thank you so much, Andre. This has been so much fun. And thank you, everybody, for joining us live. It was really fun to see everybody in the chat, you guys talking amongst yourselves, and great questions. And do you have anything coming up, Andre, that you want people to know about, or where to find you, or anything like that?
Find me is just Astrology Alert. If you type that in the YouTube search, probably even in Google, it'll take you.
Yeah, I put all your information below, but I know you hang out with Linda and you have all kinds of stuff that you do. So I'll just have people go to your channel and see what's coming. And yeah, thanks for everybody for hanging out with us on a Saturday afternoon. This was a lot of fun. So thank you, Andre.
Thank you, everyone. Yep.
Thank you. Bye, guys. See you next time. Have a good Saturday. Bye.